All right, let's dive right into this explainer and demystify something that is just a massively heavy, agonizing burden for so many people: scrupulosity. Today, we're taking the source material and really unpacking what actually happens when the pursuit of goodness twists into this absolute trap. And, spoiler alert, we're also going to look at the concrete steps you can take to finally break free. So, let's just get right into it. We've got this ancient quote from St. Basil the Great, and it honestly frames our whole topic perfectly. He basically draws a line in the sand about how we approach morality. It's the profound difference between acting out of a totally paralyzing fear of punishment, which, puts us in the position of slaves, versus acting out of a genuine love for the good itself, which elevates us to the position of children. Scrupulosity, as we're going to see, literally traps a person entirely in that first, fear-driven category. And that brings us to a really tragic paradox, and a crucial question we have to ask ourselves. What actually happens when your completely sincere desire to live a moral, upright life twists your faith into a burden that feels exactly like slavery? Keep that question right in the back of your mind, because it is the absolute core struggle of the scrupulous soul. Part 1. What is scrupulosity? Defining the spiritual and emotional burden. To really wrap our heads around this journey, we first need to take a clear, clinical look at what this condition actually is and what it definitely isn't. So scrupulosity is not just some passing religious phase. It's an incredibly complex psychological and spiritual state. The text defines it as an ultra-sensitivity. I want you to imagine the spiritual equivalent of a severe allergic reaction, right? The smallest, most totally insignificant passing thought triggers these massive, disproportionate alarms in the brain. And the result? An extreme state of indecision, deep depression, and just an overwhelming, crushing fear of divine punishment. Now, there is a super crucial nuance here, because there are actually two types of scrupulosity. The first is developmental. Think of this as a temporary phase. Maybe it's a teenager who's just getting really serious about their faith, or an adult right after a massive life conversion. It passes. But what the source material really zeroes in on today is emotional scrupulosity. This is the enduring, deeply ingrained condition. It brings these waves of mild to agonizing anxiety that can drag on for years. I mean, literally a lifetime if it's left unaddressed.
And hey, if you or someone you know struggles with this, history completely normalizes this intense battle. Even widely revered historical figures carried this exact cross. St. Ignatius of Loyola literally doubted his past sins were forgiven, examining his conscience for hours on end. St. Therese of Lisieux re-examined her motives so obsessively it literally ruined her health. The point is, people who suffer from this are not crazy. They are actually unbelievably courageous for continuing to practice their faith while lugging around such a massive psychological weight.
Moving on to Part 2, the scrupulous mindset. Inside the cycle of anxiety. Let's look at how all of this builds into a very specific and very painful daily reality.
At its absolute core, the text explains that the scrupulous mindset is almost always rooted in a totally distorted image of God. They don't see a loving parent at all. They see an exacting, unforgiving master. The person basically believes they have to become a flawless, perfect slave just to be loved. And that leads to this white-knuckled vigilance over every single passing thought. They're trying to control the completely uncontrollable, terrified that any stray thought in their head is going to lead to moral contamination.
If we put this into modern psychological terms, the source compares it directly to Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, or OCD. It's a cycle. First comes the obsession. An unwanted, totally persistent, and often horrifying thought pops into the mind, and it triggers just agonizing anxiety. Then, to reduce that massive spike in panic, the person moves to step 2, the compulsion. They immediately perform a repeated action. Maybe it's an excessively long prayer or some unprompted penance. They effectively become a moral hypochondriac, completely trapped in this loop of panic and tiny bits of temporary relief.
Because of this vicious cycle, the scrupulous mind actively filters out love. It's actually wild. Take Scripture, for example. When they read the verse, "If you love me, keep my commandments," their anxiety literally rewires the meaning in real time. What they hear is, "If you keep my commandments flawlessly, then I will love you." Do you see what happened there? They turn a beautiful, open invitation of friendship into a terrifying, conditional demand for absolute perfection. Part 3. Root causes of the condition. Unpacking the origins of the struggle. It is genuinely fascinating to see how the text systematically unpacks these overlapping causes, because, spoiler, it's not as simple as just being too religious. Instead of just pointing the finger at religion, the text lays out this rich diagnostic web of factors. Environmentally, you might have a child who felt their parents' love was conditional, and they just transfer that exact same dynamic right onto God. Physically, things like poor sleep or a lack of exercise can massively exacerbate depressive states, which then triggers the obsessive thoughts. Psychologically, it's totally fueled by intense, all-or-nothing thinking. Spiritually, there's often a hidden pride there, this obsession with self-perfection rather than just relying on mercy. And finally, the text notes diabolical temptations designed specifically to cause despair and paint a tyrannical image of God. Put it all together, and it's a perfect storm.
To combat that whole all-or-nothing mindset, the author uses this absolutely brilliant pepper versus poison analogy. It perfectly captures the critical difference between just feeling a temptation and actively consenting to it. Okay, imagine someone puts a spoonful of pepper on your tongue. You feel it, it's super unpleasant, and you spit it right out. You experience the feeling, but you didn't consent to it. That's a bad thought. Now imagine poisoned sugar. It tastes great initially, but the literal second you realize it's poison, you spit it out. You felt a pleasant sensation, but again, zero consent. The scrupulous mind absolutely has to learn that experiencing a feeling does not equal giving consent.
All right, part 4, the path to healing, moving from fear to peace. We thoroughly agitated the problem and explored where it comes from, so how do we actually get out of this trap? The prescribed healing process from the text is incredibly rigorous, but it is highly liberating. Step 1 is absolutely vital. Find a single spiritual director. Just one, not 2, not 5. Scrupulous folks tend to confess or shop whenever they don't hear what their anxiety wants them to hear. Step 2, practice absolute, cheerful obedience to that one director, which helps break that cycle of pride. Step 3 is keeping a written log of your obsessions to share with them objectively. And Step 4, this is a game changer. The director will often strictly limit daily examinations of conscience. We're talking maybe 1 minute a day, literally cutting off the oxygen supply to the anxiety.
The author also contrasts the biblical figures of Martha and Mary to illustrate a profound shift that needs to happen. Martha is super busy, totally anxious, obsessed with doing things to earn love. And the scrupulous person is exactly like that. They make the act of not sinning the actual object of their worship. Mary, on the flip side, is at peace. She is simply resting, being a child, letting herself be loved. The scrupulous mind has to stop worshiping its own flawless behavior and just learn to rest in the presence of mercy.
Aside from finding a director, the source highlights some excellent, practical daily tools you can use. Unceasing prayer doesn't mean locking yourself in a chapel 24/7. It just means recollection, a gentle awareness of God's presence as you go about your day. Expressing daily gratitude is also huge. I mean, if you write down 3 new things you're grateful for every single morning, after a month you've got 90 hard reminders of goodness, which does wonders for dispelling toxic fear. And never, ever underestimate maintaining a sense of humor. It is literally a superpower against the self-pity and dark anxiety that fuels this whole condition.
Part 5, Rules for Finding Peace. Practical Boundaries for the Scrupulous Mind. To wrap up this healing framework, the author lays out some strict rules, but these aren't meant to restrict you. They act as a protective boundary for the anxious mind to grant some much-needed immediate relief.
These rules are highly actionable. First, do not repeat doubtful sins. If you aren't as totally sure that you sinned as you are that 2 + 2 = 4, drop it. Only confess clear, certain ones. Second, if you are ever in doubt about whether you are obliged to do something, you must assume you are not obliged. Third, engrave this in your brain right now. Temptations, passing feelings, and sudden impulses are totally separate from your will. They are not sins. And finally, put your absolute radical trust in divine mercy, knowing for a fact that God has zero intention of letting you be lost.
We're going to leave you with this incredibly profound mindset from St. Joan of Arc. When her tormentors badgered her, demanding to know with absolute certainty if she was in a state of grace, she didn't panic. She just looked at them and said, "If I am in a state of grace, may God deign to keep me there. If I am not, may He deign to put me in it." It's absolutely brilliant, and it invites you to wonder about your own life. Can we truly experience the freedom of a child when we finally let go of the exhausting need for absolute certainty and simply surrender to trust? I hope this explainer has shed some real light on this difficult burden and offered a solid roadmap to peace. Thanks so much for exploring this with us.